Welcome to another live. I'm John Sierra. I'm a Tolkien scholar. Welcome to the channel. Yeah, what's going on, guys? Um, I guess I should just let this sort of populate a little bit, but I know I didn't promote this well in advance. I talked about doing it last night, and I should have made a YouTube post last night, but I was really too distraught to really do that, so I didn't. I didn't think to. And I also, just a little while ago made a post and said, "Hey, live stream in about 20 minutes, sudden live stream. Hey there, Walter, how's it going? Hope all I'm just I'm a mess today. I think I've been a mess these past few weeks, and this is not going to be an incredibly long stream. I'm not going to go for many hours and all that like I usually do. But I wanted to touch base with you guys. I wanted to update you guys on everything, and for those of you who are not at Twitch streams or not on the Discord, just let you guys know, everything that's going on, and why I'm sort of feeling so down yesterday and today. Well, really, it started the day before yesterday, but yeah. Oh, thank you, Walter. I appreciate you. And we'll talk about Tolkien, of course, because that's the whole purpose of the channel. We'll talk some Tolkien. Maybe we'll do some readings. If anybody tips anything, I'll certainly do a reading. Um, hey, Matt, how's it going? Matt Tyree. I have to start saying when I address Matts, I have to start saying last names because we have three different Matts that come into the stream, and well, I mean, one of them is like Matt Richardson, and he's not usually in the chat, but he when I say Matt, a lot of people think I mean Matt Richardson, but not in this case. There's three different Matts. I actually had a really lovely discussion with Matt just a few days ago, and that's part of what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about some Quora stuff and a little experiment that I did after talking to some of the people who work at Quora and everything. And yeah, you dig the clip. Oh, yeah, that's quite interesting. It's just the way it grows. No matter what I do, it sort of wants to go off in two different directions. I personally don't like that it does that, and I usually try to oil it so that it stays together, but I didn't do that today. But it doesn't look too bad. Actually, right there it looks good. I don't like I don't know why it wants to do that. Your grocery shopping. Oh, hey, Bonnie Bell. And hey, what does that say? Can I do a backflip? Never in my life could I do a backflip. Asking me to do a backflip would be like asking Frodo to do one. You're in India. I love India. I love India. I have a few friends over there in India, and I think it's a wonderful country. You miss all the shots you don't take. That's true. You're right. But here's the thing. I am in just a few months going to be 45 years old. And my build could be described as hobbit-like. So I don't do backflips now. I used to be more athletic. I used to do like taekwondo, and I played baseball in my youth and whatnot, but not so much now. Hey there, Brevity, how is it going? Thank you for coming to the channel. I enjoy doing it and everything. Hey, no problem, man. Don't worry about it. How do I say your name? It's like in cursive and it's really small. Can you type out your name for me so that I could? It's very small on my little screen here. The chat is very small. But anyway, guys, let me give you guys an update. So as you guys know, I have Saint. Okay, well, okay, I'll try to remember that Saint. Okay, thank you. See, that didn't look like an S. To be honest with you, I thought it was a T, and I was like, oh my. Uh, but welcome everybody. Let me give you guys an update. So most of you know that I have been without a computer for a while now. And there was some very, very hopeful news not too long ago. I have a friend of mine, her name is Corin, and she lives on the West Coast. She lives in Oakland, California, and she is building my next computer. I paid her, she ordered the parts, she's building it. The only problem is the only reason that I don't have it already, because she's very fast in working at this sort of thing, is that I had to send her some things. One of them being the graphics, the GPU, the graphics card that I bought, and because I already had that, and I had to send that to her along with like my whole old computer because she's going to extract a few things from it, like my hard drives. I have several hard drives in there, and that's where all the information is. Everything, writing, videos, images, music, everything's on there. You know what I mean? So last Thursday, which is, just 6 days ago, I went to a place up near here called the Ship Shop, which is a ship you ship from there. And I had them put the old computer and the graphics unit and everything into a box and ship it for me. And it was very expensive, but we had a fundraiser, and it went a little over, so I was able to pay for shipping, pretty easily there. So thank you guys for that. That's all on you guys, for the GoFundMe and everything. But it costs like $140 to. You don't need to rename yourself. Just maybe rethink the font. That's all. Uh, um, it costs about $140 to ship, and they told me that they gave me the receipt that had a tracking number on it, and they told me it was a UPS tracking, and that it would be there next Wednesday. Now, if you guys are able to follow a calendar, which if you're at this channel, you are able to follow a calendar because you're all very smart, that's today. So she should have gotten it today. The day before yesterday is when I was like, let me check the tracking to make sure that it's still on track. And there was like nothing in there basically. It just said label created, almost like UPS had not even picked it up. And I'm like, oh my God, what? It's supposed to arrive on Wednesday, and it's Monday, and there's no tracking, right? So I said, all right, let me try tomorrow. And if there's nothing there, I'm going to call them, right? And say, hey, it's supposed to arrive tomorrow and you haven't even really sent it out. But yesterday, Tuesday, I checked it and there was updates. However, it now said that it would likely be arriving on Monday the 20th, which is just like, right, as soon as I saw that, I was just like, oh no. It's just longer without a computer. I raise all this money and pay everything, and then this happens, and it really seems to me that I have like really terrible luck, and that every step of this has been difficult for me. So yesterday I was really kind of displeased about the situation, and I let Cora know that that UPS claims that there was a delay, and that it should be there on Monday, because then she's got to put it in there and get everything running, and then send it back to me. Well, the new computer, and then I have to set everything up. And I've been just sitting here, just really wanting to sit at my desk and stream and make videos properly, not sitting here on my phone. At least I have Frodo up there. Can you see him? He's up there. But I, it's been rough. And so I have been streaming every day, not on this channel every single day, but I've been streaming on Twitch as well. And this is really while I'm feeling down, is because I've been doing it from my phone. And last night we ran into some technical difficulties that really had me feeling quite unwell. Basically, see, right now, the method that I'm using to stream is the actual just YouTube app. It's really easy. You just click on the little plus that, and then it says, what do you want to post? Do you want to post a video? Do you want to post a post? Or do you want to go live? And then you just do it, right? And it's really easy. But for Twitch, it's a little more complicated, and I ran into so many different issues. Um, I tried using the Twitch app to stream, and that proved difficult because every time I went into like a game or something, I was muted and nobody could hear me. And I tried the Streamlabs app, and that worked, but it worked poorly. It wasn't optimized for newer versions of Android because it hasn't been updated in a really long time. And I wasn't able to touch anything like in the middle of the screen. I basically had a dead zone. And then even after I'd ended the stream, I'd have to like restart my phone before it worked properly. So that was not a no-go. So I'd been using an app called Prism Live, and that worked until last night, where it was telling me I had no viewers and it was telling me I had no chat. And at the beginning of stream, that's normal. When you first go live, there's nobody watching you for a little while, and then obviously nobody talking. But after like 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, what's the deal? Maybe I'm not actually live. So I went on Twitch and I went to my channel and I saw that there were a bunch of people in there and they had all been talking to me and I couldn't see any of it. And I tried to get it to work. I spent like an hour and a half trying to get it to work and it never did. And that left me feeling really kind of blue. And I wound up ending the stream early. And that's why I'm here. I was going to do a gaming stream on Twitch today, but decided that I don't know whether it was an issue with the app, if it's going to be fixed. I reached out to support. I got no answer, but I said, let me just go on YouTube. Hey, Time Lord guy, let me just go on YouTube for Wednesday stream and not worry about that. And then tomorrow is our normal streaming day, so I will be live on YouTube tomorrow as well. I don't have a particular itinerary today other than just sitting and talking with you guys and talking Tolkien. If you have questions, I'll answer them. I remembered that there was a question that came through on my last stream that I never got to answer. It was like one of the first questions that came in. And I kept saying, wait, let me tell the story and then we'll get to Q&A later. And then when I got to Q&A later, I tried to answer as many as I could, but I remembered that there was one after the stream ended that I didn't get to answer. So I'm going to address that, which is how did they keep time in Middle Earth before the sun and the moon existed? And it's actually really interesting. I forgot who asked that, but if anybody, if you're the person that asked that question, let me know and I'll so that I know who I'm answering. But basically, it was how did they keep time? So I'm gonna address that, and then I'm gonna talk about a an experiment that I did and a few Quora things. You know, yeah. So basically, hey, let's see, how do I say this? Epistemic. It's an interesting name. That's an interesting name, and thank you very much. Thank you very much. And of course, at any point, if anybody does a super chat or tips anything, or joins as a member during stream, I'll do a reading for you of your choice. I have books out the wazoo here. I have a history of Middle Earth here. So we have it all, and I will read whatever you want. Um, no, they did keep time. So okay, the first period since the question was specifically about, well, right now I'm if you have questions you can ask them rather, and I'll answer them. But I'm also going to talk about like an experiment I did. We're going to talk about some other stuff, but right now, here's what I'm going to ask you guys to do. If you have a question, um, try your best to wait until I'm done and answering the question that I'm answering, and then put it in the chat. That way, I don't lose track of things and I don't uh, accidentally overlook anybody. Because the thing is, on this, I can't really scroll up very far. Um, I can scroll up a little bit, but it becomes difficult to find all the questions, and I get worried that I'm going to sort of like forget about somebody, and that they're going to feel like I'm ignoring them when I'm not. But anyway, and right now here, because I did accidentally ignore somebody last time. I'm trying, and I remembered the question when I wasn't live. I'm addressing a question from a previous stream, and I don't even know if the person who asked the question is here. and they may not be, but hopefully they'll see it as a video and they'll be able to appreciate the answer. So, since the question was specifically about Middle Earth, I'm not going to address the idea of the timeless halls before the world was created. But basically, when the Ainur first came down into the world, they made these two lamps, one in the north of Middle Earth and one in the south of Middle Earth, and this was a period of time called the Spring of Arda, and basically it was this idyllic sort of just picture like the Garden of Eden type situation in Middle Earth, and there was no light or darkness really. It was just sort of a constant. Think of it like Twilight. Think of it like a constant sunrise sort of situation, and there were no shadows or anything. Like everything was just sort of perfectly lit. And then Melkor broke the lamps, and there was a big war and everything. Now, if you're wondering, how did they keep track of time in this period? They didn't really bother because there weren't people in Middle Earth, there were only angels. And they were used to an existence where there wasn't a such thing as time. So, really, what we have to do is we have to jump forward to the awakening of the elves. Now, the story as told in the Silmarillion is slightly problematic as to how the elves specifically would keep time. We know that the angels went to Valinor and they made the two trees, and the two trees were actually what signified when it was daytime and when it was nighttime, because there was a gold tree and a silver tree, and they would wax and wane, meaning that one would become very bright while the other became dim, and then the other one would become very bright while the first one became dim. And while Laurelin the Golden was very, very bright, it was considered daytime, and while Telperion the Silver was bright, it was considered nighttime. And when the elves came to Aemon, and some of them lived in Valinor or near to Valinor, um, they preferred the silver tree. They preferred the nighttime because they awoke under the stars. The word Eldar even means, from which the word elf is derived, at least in universe, it means people under the stars. So the story as told in the Silmarillion is that Middle Earth was just in darkness, and they awoke under the stars. Varda made some extra stars so that they could see, but then you would wonder about how they would start keeping track of things like days and years and stuff like that. And that's why Tolkien thought it was a little bit problematic. Now, if you, well, what's easy? What's easy is that I'll tell you how to remember it. Think of it as Galadriel and Celeborn. Galadriel is named after a laurel of golden flowers. So laurel, laurelin, gold. And in Sindarin, Celeborn's name is Teleporno, which means silver tree. So you got to think of that tel meaning silver. That's the way that I remembered Galadriel and Celeborn, the gold and the silver. But anyway, most of the traditions of the calendars came from the Undying Lands, at least until the sun first came out, and then the moon and everything. But before that, in Middle Earth, well, how did they keep track of the years and the days and everything? And really, what it was that the Noldor were sort of responsible for that, because they came over and they had their calendars and everything, and they sort of like kept track of the years and everything and taught that to everybody else. However, if you guys remember, not too long ago, a few streams ago, we got a tip, and I forget whether it was a super chat or whether it came through on like the GoFundMe or whatever. But somebody asked me to read. I think it might have been Deborah. Somebody asked me to read The Awakening of the Elves, and I took out the History of Middle Earth and I read that part. And if you remember, there were actually references to the dawn in that, to dawn and dusk, to the sun and the moon. And that's why, and in last stream, we talked about the section of Morgoth's Ring, which was called Myths Transformed, in which Tolkien was talking about the idea that the Silmarillion really is just a story that the elves tell, and that it's not really the true events, and that the sun and the moon were always there. And he said it had to be that way because he started thinking a lot on, well, if Middle Earth was in darkness for a really long time, how did the plants grow? How did the trees grow? How did, how did anything happen really? Because the sun is really important, and he was really trying to reconcile the elvish myth with reality because he always wanted people to think of this as sort of something that may have happened a really long time ago. So there you have it. So there is a lot of information about the early calendars found in the history of Middle Earth, and it's one of my favorite sort of things about how time works, because the world was shaped by these guys, the angels, that really had no concept of what time was. And when you start thinking about the Valian years, I mean, even that is sort of an interesting concept because Tolkien never really nailed down exactly how long a Valian year is, except for the fact that the closest we can come is about 8.5 solar years. Slightly more than 8.5 solar years is a Valian year. And then you can start to see how long the first age truly was. But he also toyed with the idea that the Valian years were really, really long. You would like the dwarf's version of the Silmarillion. I think that would be absolutely fascinating. And I mean, it wouldn't be called Silmarillion, I don't think, because their part in dealing with the actual Silmarils was very small. And they would tell that particular story about the Nauglamir very, very differently. They wouldn't be saying that they murdered Eleuthingel, for example, you know? And Tolkien even had the idea that the dwarves killing Thingol had to do a little bit more with some of the elves in Doriath not really liking him all that much, you know? But there you have it. Yeah. Okay, so the Noglamirian. I mean, here's the thing: is the dwarves don't really share their stories. I mean, okay, so you want me to associate a character? This is what Walter's asking me. 7 characters from the Legendarium that line up with the idea of the Catholic myth of the 7 deadly sins, which I'm sure Tolkien had some thoughts on. Okay, so let me just, really quickly here. Okay, so pride would be, I think, Feanor. Greed would probably be, I think Gollum would be greed. Wrath would be Morgoth. Lust would probably be. God, it's hard to just say Morgoth for a lot of these. I mean, he could be all 7, obviously. It could be Ungoliant. Be Ungoliant. Although I think that she fits gluttony more than lust. So I would give lust to. That's a tough one. I'm going to give it to Meglin. Meglin is lust. Envy. It's tough not to just pick Feanor again. But I'm going to say envy would be Lobelia Sackville Baggins. Sloth is an interesting one because you don't really get a lot of slothfulness in. Oh, lust could be Wormtongue too. Sloth, you don't get a lot of that in the Lord of the Rings, I think, or the Silmarillion. Usually that's not something you see a whole lot. You don't see a whole lot of like laziness in the Silmarillion or the Lord of the Rings, or even the Hobbit. Sloth might be. That's a tough one. I'll have to circle back to that. Gluttony would be Ungoliant. What do you guys think about a slothful character? You think Bilbo and Frodo are sloth? I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think that Bilbo maybe a little bit, but then he got over that pretty quickly. Give lust. Yeah, lust. Well, he was a lustful sort of guy. Bombor is sloth. I don't think. No, Bombor. You might say he's gluttony. Bombor was not really slothful. He fell into an enchanted river and went into a coma. You know what I mean? And then he was angry about being woken up because he loathed the dreams that he had so much. I think that Smaug. You see, here's the thing: is the evil characters usually encapsulate a lot of different ones. Like Gollum, envy, obviously, but also wrath and greed, and a lot of them. Melkor could be all of them. Ungoliant could be both lust and gluttony. Feanor could be pride, but also wrath and envy. So yeah, I think Smaug spent most of the time sleeping. I'm gonna give it to him. You know what I mean? He didn't really do much. He wrecked Erebor and Dale, and then mostly just like slept and occasionally would go out and eat sheep and maidens and things like that. So yeah, I think that's yeah. Tolkis for sloth. He took a nap and look what happened. Well, I think he rested and resting is not slothful. You have to understand that's a sort of a dangerous thought actually. Sleeping is not slothful. Having something to do and not doing it is sloth. Actually, okay, I have the answer for sloth. Never mind. I have the answer. Forget it all. I have the answer. The answer for sloth is J.R.R. Tolkien because he never finished these stories. He didn't finish the Silmarillion. He didn't finish the Fall of Gondolin. He didn't finish anything. And the person that called him out on this was C.S. Lewis, who said that he was a procrastinator. Procrastination is a form of slothfulness. So there you go. Tolkien himself was sloth. That's sort of like the twist at the end of that movie Seven, right? Where he said that he was envy. he he didn't finish things because he was a procrastinator and he was a perfectionist. Um, he spent a long time. You have to remember that he didn't really consider himself to be a writer, and he considered himself to be a linguist. But he would come up with these grand ideas and then not finish them. So I don't think that Tolkien would get angry at me for saying that because Tolkien was a humble guy, and he would say, uh, "Yes, I actually do believe that I encapsulate the sin of sloth, but Jesus has forgiven me." And that's what he would say. He was aware of that because that happened in the '60s. He was aware of that, and he absolutely hated it. Oh, see, here's the thing: George R. R. Martin so wants to be Tolkien, he even stole the RR. Uh, and yeah, so he's proven that he wants to be Tolkien by not finishing his own series, right? Yeah, procrastination and perfectionism is absolutely a diabolical combo, and that was the exact words that C.S. Lewis used to describe Tolkien. As a matter of fact, the biggest one was Drogo. Like he took that one right from the Lord of the Rings, but the biggest thing that C.S. Lewis said, other than that, he said that the only reason that The Lord of the Rings was finished and was published was through an act of great midwifery. So, basically what he's saying is that if Tolkien had his way and nobody else was pressuring him to finish the story and they just let him do his thing, The Lord of the Rings would have been released in the '70s after he died and it wouldn't have been finished. And Tolkien was quite eager to complain about the fact that he felt The Lord of the Rings was not finished. He felt it was too short, that it was unsatisfying, and that it should have been much, much longer. So, it's not that I know what you're talking about, Time Lord. He just said that he didn't like what he referred to as Beatle groups. Basically, Tolkien just didn't like rock music, which is fine. I don't personally agree with him, but that he didn't like Beatle groups. He didn't like Wagnerian opera. He didn't like a lot of things, you know. Those things aren't even dire wolves. It was very sensationalist reporting on those little puppies. They're cute as heck. They're cute as heck, but they're not dire wolves. They're just i- genetically engineered gray wolves, you know. But there you have it, you know. George, I don't like his writing. I don't like his writing. I'm sure he's a lovely person and all that, but I don't like his writing. Was he a brass marching bandman? No, I think that he liked Celtic music mostly. He liked some classical music, but I think mostly he stuck to sort of Celtic sort of folk music, we would call it now, right? Um, I don't think he was a big music guy, you know. He certainly, what did he like? He liked simple foods. He liked going for walks. He liked nature. He was a big conservationist. He liked his wife and his children very, very much. He loved his wife and his children. Um, he loved studying languages. He loved smoking his pipe. That was a big, big thing for him. He absolutely loved smoking his pipe. He loved mushrooms, which for me, gross, but he loved mushrooms. Um, he loved practical jokes. He loved messing with people, and he liked scaring people, and basically freak. If he could freak you out, he was happy. You know, he used to dress up like a Viking and chase his neighbor around with an axe. You know, so there's that. Yeah, he was into fitness. He really liked going out and exploring the countryside. You know, what did he think was just okay? Oh man, that's an interesting thing because he was a man of strong opinions. I don't think he ever said something was, that's all right. I could take it or leave it. He was a man of strong opinions. I don't think that oh, actually, I can think of some of the artwork that was created for the characters in the Lord of the Rings. He said was passable. So that's probably the closest thing, you know. Yeah, he was surprised about hippies liking the Lord of the Rings. But I think that he misunderstood the bohemian culture. I think if he knew what hippies were really all about and what they stood for, I think he would understand them better. What are the gates of morning? I think what you're talking about is what's known as the doors of night. And the doors of night are basically the barrier that is the edge of what we would call the created world. The door to heaven, basically. Have I ever been to Bloemfontein? No, I have not. Yeah, I mean he did all sorts of stuff like that. So, um yeah, yeah, Tolkien, like I said, he was a man of extreme passions and one way or another. It's where you were born. Oh, okay. Oh, where he was born. Yeah, that's in South Africa then. I've never been to Africa at all. Tolkien's interesting. His parents, basically his father, was a banker who transferred to a branch in South Africa, and so that's where Tolkien was born. And he was there for about 3 years before him and his mother went back to England. His father stayed in South Africa for a while longer, but then he died. He got sick and he died. So that's pretty sad, you know. That's pretty cool. Yeah. No, not the edge of the planet. Uh, it's the edge of what we would call the created world, basically, where basically you have to understand that Tolkien didn't, or at least the elves didn't envision there being a really vast universe. They thought, well, there's Arda, the planet, and there's Ambar, which is the surrounding area, and there's Ilion, which is sort of like space, and then beyond that is the Doors of Night. You know. Yeah, firmament is a good way to describe it, Matt. That's actually really accurate. It's sort of like the firmament, which is sort of a biblical sort of reference there. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Except that instead of it being water, it's this portal, you know, and it was said that Earendel would guard it because eventually the elves think eventually Morgoth's going to come back through there. He's not, but the elves think that, or some of the elves think that, and then he's going to fight Earendel in the sky, and then Earendel's going to cast him down to the earth, where he's going to fight Tolkis and Ianwe and Turin, and then he's going to die. And that's when the world is going to die, and then God is going to recreate the world with a second concert, and there's going to be, all the men and the elves and the dwarves are all going to sing with the angels and create the world without any sort of evil or anything like that. And that was sort of the idea there. So there you have it. But well, the timeless halls are something that's within the void. Everything that's outside what we would call the created world, Ea, is the void. So there you go. Um, a lot of people in the UK tease poor Birmingham. It was based on Mordor because it was Tolkien's idea of an industrial city. His idea of an industrial city was less Mordor and more Isengard. So just keep that in mind. Well, keep in mind that Tolkien hated allegory. And that wouldn't even be an allegory. It's an illusion or a metaphor. An allegory is a political or social lesson that is taught in a work. Sort of like I'll give you a sort of a modern example. The film Rocky. I can say modern; it's from the '70s, but the film Rocky was an allegory. It was an allegory for the Sylvester Stallone. His breakthrough in acting was mirrored through Rocky's breakthrough in boxing. So, what question would I ask Tolkien if I could? Oh wow, that's a great question. I think we all would want to pepper him with all sorts of questions and everything, right? And and you have to keep in mind that he's under no obligation to answer anything. So I think the question that I would ask him is I would ask him to read my paper on the origins of hobbits and then ask him if I got it right. That's what I would ask him. I would say, hey, read this and tell me how close I am to the origins of the hobbits. That's what I would do. I would show him my paper on the origins of hobbits. Which, if you've never read it, if you go to my core account and you look at my answers, it's the ones that's pinned up, which is what is the true origin of hobbits. It's a long read, but well, I think I researched it pretty well, and I would be like, read this, and then please tell me how close I am, because I would want to know if I'm really close, or I would want to know if I'm way way off. That's what I think I would go for if I had the opportunity to talk to Tolkien and ask him a question. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you guys about something interesting. Since I mentioned Quora, I wanted to bring this up. So, you guys know that Quora would, yeah, he would mark me. Yeah, I would be honored to be marked by him. Absolutely. Let him mark me. I already had Matt and Sid and everybody mark the paper, and I marked theirs. That's what we do together. But and I wanted to talk about an experiment that I did in a whole conversation that I had with Matt. So we're on the internet right now. I'm streaming to you guys live, sitting here. I don't even have a computer right now. It's going to be a little while before I have my computer, but just from a phone. And if we think about that, what a phone is, the fact that I'm able to talk to all you people and do this live and have you see me and hear me in such crystal clear quality, um, is a miracle of technology and ingenuity and science and all the things that Tolkien hated. And but it's wonderful that we're able to connect and have this like interest. But it's difficult to talk about the modern state of the internet culture and technological wizardry without talking about artificial intelligence and what and that's not a new term, but what we have now, something called generative AI. And generative AI is something that I mark with a deep, deep suspicion. I'm not saying that the idea and the concept of it is wholesale horrible, but I'm saying that the application of it has been poor at best. And I think that it's a sort of thing that would make Tolkien go into what I would refer to as an apoplectic rage to think that a computer could think like a person. Um, Unfortunately, there is a lot of generative AI content on Quora. And a lot of the questions that I see come from something called the Quora prompt generator, which is it's a generative AI thing that asks questions and can even direct them at people that are experts in their fields. And some of the most ridiculous questions that I've gotten have been AI questions. And I have tried my best to avoid them at all costs. Um, for a while, it was very easy for me to pick out which ones were AI because they were nonsense. And Quora is reasonably transparent about which questions are AI. More recently, I feel they became a little less transparent because some of the questions have become not marked as um, Quora prompt generator, but it will say, and you may have heard me say this in videos, it'll say follow up question. And there have been a few videos where I've answered these follow up questions thinking that a person wrote them. And it turns out, no, that's also AI. And I always said, I don't know what it's a follow up to, and I don't know who wrote it. But when I asked the people that work at Quora about what are these follow up questions, they told me that it was basically a new and evolved form of the Quora prompt generator. And for a while, I was working pretty closely with I'm not going to name any names, but I was working pretty closely with a woman that works at Quora, and I basically said my main issue with the AI questions are they're really bad. They don't make sense. A lot of times they ask, why did a character say a certain thing? But then it's a quote that the character never said, or that maybe no character ever said. So it'll be like, what did Saruman mean when he told Frodo, and then some nonsense quote, and I'll be like, it's just nonsense, And what she had me do to try to improve the quality of it was to every time I got one of these that they would come through. Yeah, something like that, man. I think that a person would write that though, but I'm talking about just complete nonsense, just gibberish. And I would, save the link and then like sort of write a little note on why it's a bad question and then submit it to them. And the thing is, like, if they're so bad at asking questions about literature and they're making so many factual errors, then what are they doing with the more STEM related fields, which is a very popular topic on Quora? And like how much misinformation really is out there. And then we started to have Quora having AI answers. And I've seen them on questions that people sent me. Some of them, people in the chat right now, have sent me questions on Quora, and I've answered them. But before I have the chance to answer them, the AI also would generate an answer, and it would be just completely wrong, not even close to being correct. So I decided to run an experiment and demonstrate why we we meaning me and Matt and Sid and Laurel and Dutch and everybody in the nine, the Tolkien scholars on Quora, whether they're associated with us or not, why we're important and why we can't be replaced by AI. So to do this, I went to an app that I'm sure you guys are familiar with, or at least you've heard of it, which is called ChatGPT. And I went to ChatGPT and I introduced myself, meaning that I said, this is what I do, this is what my name is, and this is who I am. So I told them who I am. I'm a Tolkien scholar and how long I've studied Tolkien and this and that, right? I wanted the AI to know that we're going to enter into sort of an adversarial um, relationship. And the reason that I did that is because the nature of these AI chatbots is that they tend to try to please people by giving answers that they think are going to make you happy while not being accurate. They don't want to ever say that they don't know, or give you an answer that might upset you in some way. So a lot of times they wind up doing hallucinations, basically. So what I did was I explained that we're going to have a little bit of a challenge. So I challenged the AI to come up with 50 lesser known or obscure facts about Tolkien's Legendarium, and to keep them short and simple, no more than a sentence. So it did its thing. It spit out 50 facts at me, or what it thought were 50 facts. And then I said, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through it and I'm going to grade it. I'm going to, since there are 50, and I will award 2 points for facts that are absolutely correct, 0 points for things that are completely fabricated or misleading or just flawed or incorrect, and half credit for things that are almost right but have some sort of caveat to them. So, who wants to guess what the percentage was? How did the AI do? Let's see who knows. Because I went through it one by one and I graded each and every one of these 50 facts that the AI spit out. And I said which ones were true, which ones are untrue, and which ones are partially true. 20 points, that's very low. That would suggest that out of 50, only 10 of them were correct. That's very, very low. So I went through it, and what I found were there were a lot that were untrue, completely falsified information. But most of them were partial credit sort of situations. And what I did was, and I also explained why each one was wrong and the rationale behind what I was saying for each one. I wasn't just saying wrong, wrong, wrong. I was saying this is wrong and this is why. So in the end result, the grade was a 65%. And the AI's answer to that was, hey, I did pretty good, you know? And I said, I want you to reflect on the fact that I have asked you for facts and you basically got a D minus. And it took a moment and it said to me, wow, you're right. A 65 out of 100 is not just getting a few things wrong. It shows a deep flaw in the way that I'm generating this. And so then I said, I want you to explain why the result is a 65%. Why are so many of them partially wrong? Because that was most of them. Most of them were partially wrong. There were a few that were correct, and there were a few that were completely nonsense. But most of them, it was I was giving 1 point instead of 2, right? Now, keep in mind that this is the way that I graded it, and any other Tolkien scholar might grade it differently. They might be harsher than I was, or they might be more lenient than I was. And I went over all of these with Matt just a few days ago, and he pretty much agreed with me. I think that he might have given it like a slightly more points, like maybe a 68, but pretty much we were on the same page. Anyway, and that's because there are a few things that me and Matt don't necessarily agree on. But anyway, the AI actually explained to me that there are 7 different reasons why it gets things wrong, why it spits out false facts and false narratives. And these don't necessarily apply to just Tolkien. They apply to anything. It wasn't a live voice conversation. No, I actually wanted to do I wanted to do a video based on this where I go over each question and sort of explain it and everything. And I still may do that video, but I need my computer. I need my computer. Am I the Rubik's Cube guy? I don't know what you're referring to. I'm sorry. I'm very bad at Rubik's cubes. So no, I don't know. I'm not the Rubik's Cube guy. I had a Rubik's Cube once when I was a kid. That was a long time ago. I've never done anything with Rubik's Cubes on the internet. So anyway, it basically told me that AI is really bad at telling you, I don't know the answer to that question, or I don't know. And also, there's something called what was the term used for it? Oh darn. See, if I was on my computer, I'd have my phone up and I'd be reading this to you. Well, there's something called mythic bias, but there's another thing called source contamination, was I think what it said, is that basically when the AI programs look out onto the internet and they see things that people have written about any topic, in this case it was Tolkien, it sort of treats every source as being equal. So, what we get from that is that basically, if somebody with flawed knowledge wrote an article and that article how, solved it in negative time, I guess that means that he starts with a Rubik's Cube that's solved, and I don't know how that would work actually. Solved in negative time. I solved it 5 minutes ago. It's like the end of Watchmen. Okay, let me get back on track here. Let me get back on track. Um, if you wrote an article about something and presented it to the internet and it got a lot of attention and views, ChatGPT would treat it as an equal thing to something that, like, maybe I wrote, right? So basically, that's the issue. And it would come up with some crazy things. Like, one of them was basically saying that, that there is allegory in the Lord of the Rings. And I said, well, that's interesting because the first, but before even the first chapter, the foreword of the Lord of the Rings says specifically that there is no allegory. And Tolkien says that he doesn't like allegory. So I don't know where you get that from, and it was like, oh, you're right, because whenever you correct an AI, it always just sort of folds and, yeah, you're right, you got me there, so that's like, we can't trust it. And it gave me like these charts and everything of like the 7 different flaws of the way that AI works. Now, um, now, now we can't discount something like Reddit, because there are a lot of great people who write great things on Reddit about Tolkien. Um, However, there are a lot of maniacs all over the internet that write all kinds of things. So, but that's the thing, is that the AI can't tell the difference, because I could go to Reddit and write something, and then somebody who saw half of the Two Towers movie, but the sound was off, and that is the entirety of their experience with Tolkien, could go to Reddit and write something, and ChatGPT would see them as being equal. That's the big issue, you know. So you get a lot of crazies, and you get, or just people that are just wrong, And there are, like I said, even during Tolkien's time, people were saying, "Oh wow, there's a great allegory for for World War One in here," and he's like, "No, that's not what I wrote." And they're like, "Oh, come on, you did." And he's like, "No, if you want to think of it that way, that's fine. That's what we call an application, but that was not my intent." And that's a big thing. Mystery Stumpy came up on something very, very important. Computers can't tell when we're being sarcastic. Most people can't tell when somebody's being sarcastic on the internet because you can't read tone through text. You know, um, so you can't. You can't go by that. You know what I mean? So I think that once I get my computer going and I'm caught up on everything, I'm gonna make a video about this, about the dangers of believing a so because right now, let's say if you have a question, right? Okay, obviously you're gonna come to me, right? But let's say I'm not available or whatever, or you just need an answer really, really fast. Where do you go, right? Do you go to Quora? No, you need something right away, right? You go to Google. And what's the first thing you see on Google? An AI summary. And I've seen those AI summaries. They're a nightmare. They're terrible. They're awful. Um, they don't often have anything to do with what you searched. You know, they're badly sourced. So I had a conversation with Matt. I called him on the phone and I told him about this experiment. And I said, I did this experiment where I asked an AI to give me 50 facts about Tolkien, and this is what it did. And I told him the same story that I just told you guys. And he gave me an interesting sort of, and this is really interesting. He told me, well, this is what you could do. And he came up with this idea. He says, tell it to do the same thing, but give it a directive to take extra time to think an answer, right? So I said, I want you to come up with 10 additional facts about Tolkien or Tolkien's Legendarium. I want you to keep in mind all of the logical fallacies and issues that you outlined, and I want you to try to avoid them, and I want you to take as much extra time as you need. Because normally when you type into ChatGPT, it spits out an answer within like 5 seconds. So it sat there for nearly 2 minutes. It was like a minute and 51 seconds. And it processed it. And then it gave me 10 facts. And then I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to grade it, except since there's only 10, I'm going to give each one a rank between 1 and 10. And since I was on the phone with Matt at the time, he collaborated on this, and we came to an understanding on how we would grade each one. So, like a 10 out of 10 would be like a perfect fact that makes perfect sense. A 1 out of 10 would be something that's just completely way off, you know? And we found that just giving it 2 minutes to think instead of, 10 seconds, it got an 86% instead of a 65%. Now, that's a smaller sample size, but it's an interesting result for two reasons. One is that it's a clear improvement. But the other reason that it's an interesting result is that I told it to take all the time it needs to give me 10 true facts, and it still got things wrong. It still messed up. So it went from getting a D to getting a B. And while you'd say, well, that's not bad, but it's also not what I asked for. I didn't ask for musings or anything like that. I asked for facts. And basically, the lesson here is that no matter what you do, you cannot reliably get facts from AI. You could maybe get a higher percentage of things that are correct if you tell it to think longer. But I don't think we're ever going to be in a position where everything the AI says is true. We're never going to be in that position because it has to answer you and it has to source these claims and everything. And what was interesting is that it actually gave me sources for each of the claims it made, but that in the ones that it got wrong, it wasn't linking to things that were wrong. It was linking to things that it misunderstood. That it was able to read text, but it wasn't able to interpret text. And that's what a Tolkien scholar does. I don't just read the books and then spit the facts back at you. Like when you ask me a question, I'm just saying, well, on page 68, it says this, this, and this, because anybody could do that. But to actually analyze the text and to study it is a whole other level, don't you think? It's completely different from just I've read all this. All these books here and all these books here, I've read all of them and I remember them fairly well. You know, hey James, how's it going? Hey Coyote. Discernment. Yeah. It's able to understand things. So it could read, like an AI could read an article that somebody wrote about Tolkien, and that person could be saying very, very true things and be completely right about everything, and then the AI could just give you a garbled version of it, and um, and there you go. Okay. Do I think that Sauron was kind of hoping that Morgoth would fall so Sauron could take the reins, so to speak, and finally be free of his master? Good question. So, oh no, no, they do, Bastic, they do, because I said I want facts, and it doesn't say, well, I can't give you facts. You know what I mean? Don't date robots? I don't know. It would lead to the Stepford Wives. Is that what you? Don't date robots. But anyway, this is why you can't rely on AI for anything. And I think that's the issue, is that it never should have been anything more than a toy that you can kind of mess around with. The fact that so many people and like large companies and everything are relying so heavily on something so unreliable is what Tolkien would refer to as the devilry of Isengard. We're in a lot of trouble right now. And I don't just mean in the Tolkien community, I mean in general. Now, I'm going to answer the Sauron question. I can't speak to specifically what his hopes and dreams were in the first age. But I'm going to say no. And the reason I'm going to say no, there's two reasons really. The first is that when Morgoth lost the War of Wrath, and that was pretty much the end of him at that point, right? Um, Sauron was really freaked out about that. And his first instinct was to surrender himself and to try to be forgiven. Now, he did it wrong. And that was born out of his fear and his pride. But he went to Eonwa and he said, look, I know I did a lot of bad things, and I'm really sorry about that, and I'd like to make it right. Will you forgive me? And Eonwa basically said, that's not up to me, man. That's not. I don't really have the authority to forgive you. I think you need to go to Manwë, and then he can forgive you. And Sauron thought to himself, if I go to that guy, I'm probably going to be in a lot of trouble. I don't think I can do that. So what he tried to do then was, maybe if I just do good things, forgiveness will come to me. And that's not the way that it works. He was told the way that it works. He didn't want to do that. He had a lot of pride because he was a big deal to Morgoth, and then he would basically become, well, he thought that he would basically become nothing at that point. And also because he was afraid of what might happen to him, that he might wind up in Mandos for a really long time. Um, he just saw his master get hauled off in chains to Valinor with his feet cut off. So he's like, whoa, I don't want that to be me. So I think that, like, the fact that fear was his first instinct after Morgoth fell, he wasn't gleeful. He didn't disappear and then try to be like come back later. Um, I think that I don't think they were equal, by the way. Like, Ayanwa was definitely like the head Maya, but the issue was that he didn't feel he had the authority to absolve Sauron. He couldn't give him absolution. He couldn't pardon him because that wasn't his in his authority. So Sauron was kind of looking for the quick fix, right? He wanted to be on the winning side, so to speak. So I don't think he was hoping for Morgoth's fall. He put in a lot with Morgoth, and when you go with somebody like that, you want them to win. When you cast your lot in with somebody, you want that person to win. And when they go down, then you have to scramble and try not to go down with them. And that's sort of the issue. Now, like, if you're thinking of him as sort of like,
I'm going to use a rather modern, well, more modern than the Lord of the Rings, at least. He's not like Starscream, you know. He's not just like waiting for his moment to take over, because he only wound up doing that later on because he felt that the Valar had abandoned Middle Earth and that he was the only guy who could save it from chaos. I am talking about authority. So, you know, he's not like Starscream is what I'm getting at. So he's the guy who when the regime falls, he panics and tries to put on the other side's uniform and blend in. And then when that doesn't work, he sort of like whistles and walks off. I'll just be over here, you know. And then I'll just be a good guy and hopefully things will work out. And then eventually he starts to think, oh man, the Valar really aren't doing anything with Middle Earth. Maybe I should take over and run this properly, you know? Because that's what Sauron's issue is. He's not like the kind of evil that's gleeful about it. He's not. That's Morgoth. He's not like, haha, I want to take over and make everyone miserable and just kill a bunch of people and wreck the world and get God really really angry about it. He's sitting there thinking, look at all this chaos everywhere. Everything's chaotic and people are just doing things and they don't even think about the consequence. I gotta do something. So what it comes down to is Sauron is sort of like the ultimate. Why is that? Why is that message hidden? There's nothing wrong with that message. So bizarre. Okay, he's sort of like the ultimate authoritarian who just wants to like keep everybody under control because he really thinks that's for the best. He really thinks that he's the good guy. Whereas Morgoth is sort of like, I'm just going to ruin it for everybody and make everybody miserable. I'm going to just wreck the world, you know? All right, so a Time Lord guy asked, which was not anything bad that should be hidden, why were the Entwives, surely if they don't mate like humans, why did they need female Ents? Well, who said they don't mate like humans? Who said they don't? Well, he wanted to keep everything organized. That's the thing. I'm not a therapist, okay, so let me get that out of the way. If he was to, I know it was simply under review. I just don't know why it was. That's not anybody's fault. That's YouTube being weird. Maybe the word mate did it. I don't know. But there's keep in mind that the Ents are not plants. You got to get that out of your head. They're not plants. They're giants that from a distance, if you squint, might look kind of like trees. So they propagate themselves the same way that men do, the same way that elves do, the same way that orcs do. Thank you, Max, for the tip. If you want me to do a reading, let me know what I should read for you. So, they are giants. They are not, they are more like people. They're not, yeah, a tree, I am no tree. They're not plants. That's something we have to get out of our head. They might look kind of plant-like from a distance, but they're not. They're not plants. Max, if you want me to read something for you, just let me know. Oh, well, everything with the Ents takes a very, very long time, which actually, if you think about, if we start talking about mating rituals and the fact that everything with them takes a long time, we might get demonetized. But so let's not go too far in that direction. But oh, there's another super, Walter. Let me know. Let me know if you want me to read something for you. I mean, Max first, but wait, hold on. I need to scroll up though because I was finishing a point on something here. What chaos is it that Sauron was so worried? Okay, so if I'm not a therapist, but if I was a therapist and Sauron was my patient, I would diagnose him as such. Careful, Matt. Let's not get in trouble here. I would diagnose him as having what's known as OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So, what that basically means is it's sort of like OCD, but when somebody has OCD, they know it. They know they have OCD. They know that their compulsions are strange, and they don't wish to have them, and they know that there's something up. But when you have OCPD, it's sort of like you think everybody else is crazy. Like, why isn't everybody else closing the door 3 times in a row? Don't they know bad things will happen? So Sauron is seeing people behave in ways that are dangerous or reckless or even wrong, and he's like, oh my god, look at what they're doing. What is wrong with them? Why are they doing that? And then he gets obsessive about it, and he wishes to control them. So there you go. Hey, could you I need you to change your name if you're going to be chatting in here, please. You know who you are. Hi, how's it going? But I can't have that popping up on my screen right now. But anyway, Max, well, to answer you, Walter, I don't know when the end of stream's going to be. I'm sort of like just going for a while, you know. Max, did you want a reading? If you don't, that's okay. But you guys did super chats. You did a tip. So if you want me to do a brief reading for you, let me know what book, what part, and I'll do it for you. Same thing for you, Walter. I don't know what you mean by am I that guy? Yeah, you know what? I'm him. I'm him. I'm that guy. I don't know who you're referring to, but let's say yes, I'm him. I should, before you say something like that, you should say, "What are you, a cop or something?" Like, who wants to know, right? But anyway, yeah. So back to the Antwives. The idea, like, yes, there are male ants, there are female ants. They are more like people than they're like trees. Would it be worse to have OCD that you know is an OCD and you just can't help yourself, or one that you think is real? Well, that's interesting because I've known people with OCD and I've known people with OCPD. And I think that, yeah, like the thing is, like the guy I know is a fellow named Axel. He lives in Sweden. He has OCPD. And yeah, his big behavior that he does on the internet is that every single thing he types has to end with a period, even if it shouldn't. Like if he puts an emoji in the chat, he has to put a period after it. There's a period in his username. I'm sure his passwords all end in a period, you know? Would I rather watch? I'm not saying that. Come on, come on. Let's reel it in, guys. Let's reel it in. Okay. Walter, I need you to remove that comment there. Let's reel it in. Okay. And hey, King Thors, how's it going? I'm glad you enjoy the channel. But yeah, I don't know. Like I don't personally have. What if he types ellipses? He would have one extra dot. It would be 4 dots, right? Because an ellipses is three dots. Here, maybe I can do that. Yeah, we're just gonna get rid of that. Okay, there we go. Oh, looks like we both did it at the same exact time. Yeah, let's not do stupid things like that. I mean, this is a channel. Yes, we have fun, but it's a scholarly channel. We're not trying to like do silly things like that, foolish things like that. I mean, I feel like I'm going to turn into Gandalf here. You fool of a took! You tried to make me say something naughty. Well, it said that I removed it, and then it said that you removed it. I think we both did it at the same time. Are we meant to believe the orcs breed and the normal creatures and the crazy idea that they're tortured elves? So what the elves believe, or like I should say, what some of the elves believe, is that Melkor took some of the elves away because some of them vanished, right? Never to be seen again. And that was around the same time that orcs started appearing. Who took? Yeah. So it was said, it is held by the wise that some of these tortured, captured elves were the first orcs. It's not true. Tolkien didn't believe that it was true. He hated the idea, but he put it in there as something that they believed. Like even in like the Book of Lost Tales, they believe that Maglin was half orc, and the hobbits believe that the Tooks married a fairy, And there's all sorts of different things that elves believe that are not true. Um, if Frodo had the mithril armor when they were in Weathertop, would he have been wounded by the Morgul blade? No. You got to remember. So those Morgul blades are designed to break. They're brittle. The idea is that the ring wraith would stab somebody with the knife, and that a piece of it will break off inside of them and make its way to their heart and turn them into a wraith. But and that's almost what happened. There was a little piece. If you remember, his wound healed really, really fast, right? He was still in pain, but the actual wound closed up really quick, and there was a little piece of the blade. That's what Elrond said. So if it's meant to break off just in flesh and bone, mithril, it's going to shatter completely. And that's why he Bilbo gave him the armor, because Bilbo realized, wow, man, if I had left the armor to him, that never would have happened. He almost died. It is a poison. It is absolutely a poison, but the poison, if you remember, like Elrond said, there's a little piece of the blade. It's a poison blade, but it's making its way in there. I think Elrond might have done a little surgery on him based on what it said. I and if you remember, Saruman stabbed Frodo as well, and that knife broke apart. And that was probably like a regular knife, right? That wasn't some special like witch knife, like what the Witch King had. So I don't think that any blade is going to get through a mithril coat like that. Since it was described as being chainmail, I would assume that an arrow would would hurt a lot and maybe even kill you. Um, Frodo got hit by a spear at one point, and while that didn't kill him, it did hurt a lot. So there you have it. All right, Walter, could you get rid of some of the nonsense we have in the chat, please? I think the dwarves forged better weapons, but I think that the it's okay, Sawyer. It's okay, and I'm sure that's fine. Like if you came by my Twitch channel with that name, I'd be fine. It's just on YouTube. I don't. Um, the dwarves would make weapons that would last thousands and thousands of years and never be tarnished in any way, really. Where the elves would make weapons that would have really sort of wonderful magical properties. So what we have to remember is that Narsil, which later became Anduril, Aragorn's sword, which was the sword of Elendil, which was used along with Gil-galad's spear, of course, Aeglos, but it was used to battle an angel. It killed one of Sauron's bodies, and it was made by a dwarf. So I think that like the dwarves, we're probably on the same level of the elves on a lot of things in crafting. The elves were probably better at jewelry, although the dwarves were very, very good at jewelry. Um, but I think that when it comes to actually making weapons, I would give it to the dwarves, especially since the elves, they tend to focus on two things. They would make blades, like swords and knives, and they would make bows. Whereas the dwarves would make all sorts of, they would make hammers and axes and maces and swords and knives and anything you can think of, really. They probably made siege towers and all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah. So I think that I would say for weapons specifically, I think the dwarves, yeah, the dwarves win that. Um, and keep in mind, the mithril armor, that was made by dwarves as well. It was made for elves, but it was made by dwarves. And just the fact that there was an elvish prince somewhere that asked a dwarf to make him armor, That's pretty amazing. Like if so basically, because you have to remember the dwarfish culture is really interesting. Um, they they don't really concern themselves with farming or anything like that. They don't grow food. They don't make food. So everybody's got to eat, right? So this is how they would feed themselves: is they would trade things like weapons for food, or things like knowledge for food. They would take on elvish apprentices and stuff like that. So there you have it. Can we be sure the Witch King learned his magic from Sauron when he was maybe a priest in Numenor? Yeah, it's possible. Here's the thing. Tolkien once said that 3 of the 9 Nazgul were from Numenor, which means there are 5 that are not. Or, I'm sorry, there are 4. Five. There are there's 6. There are 6 that are not. So if 3 of them are from Numenor, I mean maybe the Witch King is one of them. We don't know if the Witch King is from Numenor or not. Basic, thank you for the tip. Thank you for that. What is the nature or source of non-Ainur sorcery? I'm going to get to that. Absolutely. We'll talk about that. But anyway, what I'm basically getting at is that we really don't know where the Witch King's from. The only one of the Nazgul that we can be sure of is Kamel, because he was called Kamel the Easterling, so he was definitely from Middle Earth. But there were some of them that were called the King's Men, which came, from Numenor, that they joined with Sauron, and they later called themselves the Black Numenorians because he taught them black magic. And that brings us to Basik's question here. What is the nature or source of non-Ainur sorcery? And really what this is that Tolkien was really interesting in the intro to the Silmarillion, the forward. He mentions that he never used the word magic in a consistent way. And King Thus, I actually talked about that in a recent video. I'm going to get into that in a moment, but let me answer this question because this came in through a tip note. When Tolkien says magic or sorcery, what he really means is a skill that is innate to a certain race. That's when he says magic. Now, sorcery is a little different. You start getting into this idea of the Morgul magic, right? Necromancy. Where does it come from? And in the case of it, it is a sort of a skill that was taught by Sauron and by Morgoth. So it is Ainur based. And what we learn through the deep study of the histories of Middle Earth is that as people, we're really not that different from the Ainur ourselves. It's just that we're more limited in what we can do in terms of the magnitude of it. For example, greetings from Croatia, greetings from the United States. Hi, Luca, how's it going? So what we have here is a situation where we can do a lot of the things that the Ainur can do on a much, much lesser level. The biggest thing that they do is music based, right? And it wasn't a stream. It was one of my episodes. But I'll give you a brief rundown on that real quick. But it was one of the most recent episodes of Tolkien Q&A. And if you look at those in the descriptions of each video, you'll see timestamps of each question, so you'll be able to find it there. But I'll give you a quick overview today. I will. By the way, Croatia is Mordor, not literally, but if we consider that if Oxford is Hobbiton, in England is the Shire, there's actually a real volcano in Croatia that corresponds to Mount Doom. So there are parts of of Bosnia and Croatia, and that sort of area is sort of like what Mordor was based off of. Obviously, it's a lot nicer than Mordor, probably because, as Tolkien would say, a lot of time has passed, and they haven't had any evil angels taking up residence there in a really long time. So now it's a wonderful place. But back, thousands and thousands of years ago, that's where Mordor was. And that's why he referred to Italy in real life. He referred to it as Gondor, You need to tell your Croatian friend. Just make sure that you're sensitive about it. You don't want to offend him. Okay, so Durin. So here's the thing: there is no reincarnation of Durin. It's just what the dwarves tell everybody else. They say, hey, there was this child that was born. He looks like Durin. He acts like Durin. We're calling him Durin. And we're going to say that he's a reincarnation of the original guy. But the actual real um, reality of it, which was outlined in the book The Peoples of Middle Earth, and then was expanded on in the book The Nature of Middle Earth, is that Durin is immortal, and or at least he's longevous. So basically, when he dies, what he really is doing is he's going into a very, very deep slumber and slowly sort of healing and regenerating all the hurts and wounds and tiredness and everything. And then eventually he wakes up and he resumes his life. And that the dwarves are very secretive with their religion, and they're very secretive with their languages and their true culture. They just tell everybody, this is Durin the second, this is Durin the third, this is Durin the fourth, right? And we're just doing a tradition that we're naming him after Durin, but in fact it is Durin. And this actually applies to all of the fathers of the dwarves, possibly also the mothers of the dwarves, although we don't get anything about them, the six mothers of the dwarves. Durin wouldn't have had an immortal wife anyway, because there were only six mothers of the dwarves, and Durin awoke alone. I did a really deep dive on this. You could either go to Quora and go to my profile and search for Durin, or the most recent videos, I forget which one it was, but it was like in the last three that I did of not lives, but just videos. I haven't been able to do videos for a little while because of not having a computer. But it's in like those last three, and if you click on my videos and you look at the descriptions, you can see timestamps that tell you where all the questions are, and one of them is about Durin. I don't think I used it as a thumbnail though, but yeah. You wonder what Durin would have looked like on the battlefield? I mean, probably just completely unstoppable, right? I mean, they described Gimli as being a force of nature, and that Dane the Second Ironfoot as being a magnificent warrior, and Thorin Oakenshield was an incredible warrior. So I can only imagine what Durin was like, you know. Would I say the nearest thing there is to a witch in Middle Earth is Galadriel? If I said that, Gimli would come after me. So no, I wouldn't say that. As a matter of fact, Galadriel herself would be rather offended by that. She would say, magic, witchcraft, what are you saying? Why do you use the same words to describe the deceits of the enemy that you use to describe what I do? So the witches would be the sorcerers, people like the mouth of Sauron. That's a witch right there, right? There you go. She's more, no, she would hate that. Sorceress? No. See, she would be like, I am an elf. I am of the Noldor. That's what she would say. She got very confused when the hobbits would say elf magic. She doesn't like that term because she's thinking magic. That's what the bad guys do. I'm just out here baking cakes and making little crystals. You know what I mean? She didn't really do that. It's both, Sawyer. It's actually both. It came from both because he hated the idea that he had created a race that had no capacity for good and was always evil. He didn't like the connotations there, and he really was struggling with whether or not the orcs had souls. Because if the idea of them being the descendants of tortured elves was true, that would mean that they have souls. And he didn't like the idea that they might not be able to find redemption because he believed that anybody other than Morgoth was capable of redemption. And when he was asked about the possible salvation of orcs, he said that he can't imagine how it would happen, but he has faith that it will eventually happen. So her elf powers are really just the things that she does in her everyday to day life. She doesn't think of it as magic or sorcery or anything like that. She thinks of it as this is just what we do as people. These are our skills. These are the things that we practiced for a long time. Although in her case, one of her teachers was Melian, who is an angel. So there is that as well. But I would say her father, her mother, her uncle Fingolfin, Eleuthingel, and yes, even Melian, and she was also really good friends with Gandalf too. When Ungoliant dies, would she have had a skeleton? So Tolkien was not really very I don't think he knew how spiders worked. At one point, he refers to Shelob as having a hide. Spiders don't have hides. He referred to Shelob as having a stinger. Spiders don't have stingers. Now, we could sit there and say, well, Shelob's not really a spider. Ungoliant's not really a spider. They're demonic creatures that have taken a spidery form. Either way, the answer is no. Because if we think of Ungoliant as being sort of like a very big spider, we would say that the skeleton is the outer part. They don't really have what we would refer to as an endoskeleton. They have what's called an exoskeleton, and the insides are just gooey and everything. But if we consider the elvish myth to be true on how exactly it was that Ungoliant went out, and that she traveled to the south and eventually became so hungry that she somehow consumed herself, we would say there probably wouldn't really be much of anything left. I kind of imagine her just kind of imploding like a star imploding upon itself. So there you have it, you know. And yes, Bassic, you're true. The arithmetic of souls is very difficult to crack. Tolkien was concerned with it. He did settle on the idea that the orcs might actually just be animals and that they're not really people. But even that, he didn't like it completely, you know, especially since he had established that some animals have souls and some don't, you know. And when we get into like the whole idea of necromancy and the things that Morgoth did when he created the orcs and he created the trolls and he created the dragons and we say at what point do we consider like does Smaug have a soul? Does uh, it's really sort of interesting, right? Like a lot of them are talking, thinking peoples that have names and their own thoughts and desires and everything, you know. Were the trees in the old forest ents like the old man willow? Okay. Oh, wait, let's try this. Were the trees in the old forest ents or like old man willow just trees with evil? Oh, okay. So old man willow is definitely an anomaly. It's an evil spirit that was trapped in a tree, possibly by Tom Bombadil. But the trees that get around and start walking and everything, and that almost invaded the Shire, and the reason they had to build a wall to keep the trees out, they are what are known as huorns, which are trees. And the way that it was described by Legolas and by Treebeard was that all these things have souls. They have spirits. And this is why it's troublesome with the orcs and everything. Because the way that it was described in the Silmarillion was that spirits would come from the outside and they would inhabit the Kelvar and the Ulvar, meaning that all of the plants and the animals have spirits within them. They have souls. That's why Tolkien was a little iffy on the whole orcs are animals thing. And the elves specifically woke up the trees and got them to start talking and moving and stuff like that. And then the Ents were their shepherds. They were these giant guys that would look after the trees and protect them and everything and sort of keep them in line. So the Huorns are what Treebeard refers to as trees that have become entish, that they're walking around and speaking in their own language and everything. Did Melkor even give his evil creation souls? He doesn't have the ability to do that in the terms of he can't create a soul. But as a necromancer, he can capture a soul and put it into something. And he definitely did that. And he also could put a little bit of himself into something, which is absolutely what he did with Glaurung, the first dragon. Would every blade of grass have a soul? Maybe the untold number of Maiar and have. So yeah, Tolkien had that idea at one point about there being something even lower than the Maiar. I don't think it's every blade of grass because there was grass, there was trees, but what Manwë said to Yavanna, which was words that came from God Himself, was that spirits would come from the outside and they would inhabit the plants and the animals. Would they inhabit all of the plants and the animals? Or just some of the plants and the animals? That's a question that we really don't have an answer to. And it really is hard to imagine every single blade of grass having a soul. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? So I would surmise that some of the plants have souls, some of the animals have souls. Tolkien was clear about animals that some of them had souls and some of them did not, because he referred to animals with Fea, and then he referred to soulless animals. So if we could say, that some animals have souls and some do not, we can assume the same for plants. That trees have souls and some do not, and that even some things that we don't even think of. Oh, Time Lord guy, I have to say it. My cabbages. Okay, some of the things in Middle Earth that we don't even think would have souls do. Mountains have souls. Gimli was very clear about that, and nobody wanted to correct him on that. And as a matter of fact, in that chapter of Ali and Yavanna in the Silmarillion, actually, I don't think it was earlier than that. When the eagles were created, Yavanna thought to herself, "Wow, they're going to look so cool up in my trees," and it was like, no, the god is like, no, your trees aren't big enough for these guys. They're going to go in what he referred to as Manwe's trees, which are the mountains. Man, I don't want to think about coleslaw having a soul. uh. Would I say the essence of sorcery and necromancy is ultimately coming from Melkor? Yes, absolutely, 100%. 100%. You're absolutely right on that, Basic. Then is Valinor America? Okay, so no, because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, Sawyer. I live in America, and I'm really not feeling the whole Undying Lands thing here. It's pretty terrible here, so I don't think so. No, no, unfortunately not. Let's see what was held for review. I don't understand why that was held for review. I'm not 48. Give me another 3 years and 2 months and I'll be 48. If mountains have souls, does that mean when the dwarfs found the Arkenstone, they technically killed the mountain? No. No. Because even the stones that were taken from the mountains and delved by the elves to create the land of Eregion had voices in the Third Age. And Legolas was able to hear those voices and hear what they had to say. They were still alive. So, no, carving the stones doesn't actually hurt them. I believe the line that was said by the stones of Holland, the Eregion stones, to Legolas was something like, "Deep they delved us, and then they left, and we're all alone now." They set up a whole thing and then they left. And the UK is the Shire at the end of the Golden Age. Well, specifically, the Shire is England. So there you go. Get a 20-year-old haircut and you look like you're in your face. Roni, what do you care? What do you care? How old I am or how old I look? Who's my fabrics? I don't think you meant fabrics, Walter. Delved by Elves sounds like a power metal song. Let's get Blind Guardian to do that, right? Delved by Elves. I could see it. I could see it. Let's get Blind Guardian to do that. You're a hairstylist? Okay. So? I'm doing a stream about Tolkien here. I didn't think you meant fabrics. My favorite warrior in the Legendarium, gotta be Fingolfin, right? I love the idea that Fingolfin could tap into a primal rage and go completely berserker. I thought that was so cool in the Silmarillion. Was Moria especially an evil mountain having such creatures in its pits? No, see, we got to remember that Moria is a really, really big place that exists below several mountains. There's a whole mountain range there, the Misty Mountains. And what's interesting is that if you read the Lord of the Rings, long before they come to Moria, before they even try the pass of Carathras, Gimli points out the mountains and he tells you the name of each one. And he even says, that one's a jerk. He's talking about Carathras. He doesn't like that one, right? But I would say that the majority of of uh, of Moria was under the mountain that the dwarves called Zirac-Sigil, the silver something or other in Elvish, and Zirac-Sigil, I don't know what it means in Dwarvish because we don't really, their language isn't glossed, but that's probably where the majority. But you got to remember, Moria is gigantic. It was not an evil place. It was, and you have to remember that when the Balrog came to the Balrog didn't come to Moria. Moria was already there. He went to a place that was underneath Moria, and and he was basically just running away from the War of Wrath and hiding because for all he knew, even in the third age, he doesn't know that like it's a third age, or anything like that. For all the Balrog knows, the land is still crawling with elves and Maiar and everything, and it's still occupied by what he would consider to be enemy forces. And then the first, and then all of a sudden Gandalf comes out of nowhere saying, I'm a wielder of the flame of Anor, and I'm a servant of the secret fire, and all this stuff. And he's like, oh, I'm in trouble, So there you have it. If Frodo went to get his hair done, would he get a perm? I don't think hobbits need perms. They're described as having naturally curly hair, so I'm not trans, man. What are you talking about? What kind of weird questions are coming through the chat right now? Why do we have so many weirdos in the chat? Maven, why are you weird like that? I actually want you to answer. Why are you weird? What is your major malfunction? I'm not going to get an answer. I know that. They're probably sitting there like, oh, I didn't go for the bait. Would Gandalf have died against the Balrog if he was the white instead of the gray? The only way that he became the white is by dying. But if you're saying if he was the white, I guess from the beginning, like if he had Saruman's job and everything. And that's interesting because I think that the white wizard would not find himself going through Moria. And that's why he had to be the gray wizard. You know? No, you're weird. Because first of all, you came in here and you made a baseless and very bizarre assumption about me and asked me a question that has no basis in reality. Walter, could you get rid of this idiot for me? Boom. Yeah, boom is you getting banned from the chat. Goodbye. Like, what a weirdo. But no, I need you to get rid of that guy. Just ban him. We don't need that. Is it like, telling me I'm slow because what was the reasoning here? For thinking a question is weird. No, that's a weird question. It's a weird question and you're a weirdo. We don't need that. It doesn't matter what he's talking about. He's out of here. He's out of here. People come and they just sort of try to stir trouble, and that's all they live for, and that's all they have in their life. Walter got him. That's so. The hammer of grind. I think you meant Grond. I think you meant Grond. You got to watch that autocorrect there. What's Gandalf? You're on a Tolkien channel and you don't know Gandalf? Yeah. No, of course he was trolling, and it was a bad attempt at trolling. Bad attempt at trolling, Really stupid. Hey, Medio, how's it going? Like, I've been on the internet long enough, All right, guys. Anybody that I owe readings to that wants me to do a reading, let me know. Some Discord in the Johnny Lindala. Oh, no. You don't want to hear me sing. You don't want to hear me sing. All right, yeah, we're having some stupidity still happening here. We're just going to get rid of that. How do you do reading? With my eyes and lips. Guys, don't feed into it. Don't feed into it. Something from the Mariner's Wife. That's a good idea. Children of Húrin. That's a good idea too. I don't know why Children of Húrin. See, YouTube's moderation is so bad that it hid Matt saying I'd go for some Children of Húrin, but then you have these weirdos coming in here and talking about stuff that has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about and asking some strange weirdo questions, and that gets by, you know? Anything about the Blue Wizards? There's not a whole lot about the Blue Wizards. There's not a whole lot. Okay, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna read a little Children of Húrin because that's the idea that I like the best. Here we go. But yeah. Oh, hold on a second, guys. Let me scroll up because I think I might have missed a few things while we were dealing with some of the nonsense that was going on. Oh, hey, Sayak. I didn't say hi to you. How's it going? Yeah. Why did you ask? What's Gandalf? That's such a strange. All right. Okay. Yeah, we have another idiot. Why do these people? Why do these people think that that's funny? It's like imagine being that bored. You're like, oh, this guy does a stream about J.R.R. Tolkien. Let's go and ask him weird questions, right? I have the Children of Húrin here. Let's. I'm gonna put the. Oh, I already got it. Don't worry. I already got it. Don't worry. The person's name was curse words in Russian anyway. It's not. Yeah, it's not funny. It's not funny. It's not clever. It's not cute. It's just stupid. Like sometimes people come in here with jokes and they're funny. That wasn't funny. I'm going to put the phone down briefly because I'm going to find a good spot in the Children of Húrin that we could read. So enjoy looking at the ceiling for a little while. I think I know which chapter I'm going to read from. Chapter 6. Say, Sithis, how's it going? Yeah, it's funny when you're 12. I don't know. I don't know any 12-year-olds, so there's another idiot. The orcs are here. See, it's clearly like either one person with a whole lot of different accounts, or it's just a bunch of kids like, oh, let's go and ask stupid questions. I need a smoke detector. Unfortunately, the reason that there isn't one there is because no matter what I did, it chirped and beeped and everything. So, even with fresh batteries and everything, there's something wrong with the wiring. So, not in this room. We have smoke detectors, just not in this room. That's all. Tater Crisp, what are you even talking about? Oh my god. What are these idiots? No, I don't talk about any of my personal life, okay? This is a wizard beard is what it is. Oh, the Christopher Lee version is so good. I can't pretend that I'm going to be as good as Christopher Lee here. But yeah. All right, let's read a little bit of chapter 6 here. Turin among the outlaws. There's no way it'll be as good as Christopher Lee, but I'll read you a bit. Now the tale turns again to Turin. He, believing himself an outlaw whom the king would pursue, did not return to Beleg on the north marches of Doriath, but went away westward, and passing secretly out of the guarded realm, came into the woodlands south of Teighlin. There before the Durneath many men had dwelt in scattered homesteads. They were of Haelith's folk for the most part, but owned no lord, and they lived both by hunting and husbandry, keeping swine in the mast lines, and tilling clearings in the forest which were fenced from the wild. But most were now destroyed or had fled into Brethel, And all that region lay under the fear of orcs and of outlaws, for in that time of ruin houseless and desperate men went astray. Remnants of battle and defeat, and lands lay waste, and some were men driven into the wild for evil deeds. They hunted and gathered such food as they could, but many took to robbery and became cruel, when hunger or other need drove them. In winter they were most to be feared, like wolves, and garwith, wolf men they were called by those who still defended their homes. Some 60 of these men had joined in one band, wandering in the woods beyond the western marches of Doriath, and they were hated scarcely less than orcs, for they were among them outcasts hard of heart, bearing a grudge against their own kind. The hardest of heart was one named Androg, who had been hunted from Dorloman for the slaying of a woman. And others also came from that land, old Algund, the oldest of the fellowship who had fled from the Nerneath, and Forweg, as he named himself, a man with fair hair and unsteady glittering eyes, big and bold, but far fallen from the ways of the Edain, of the people of Hador. Yet he could still be wise and generous at times, and he was the captain of the fellowship. They had dwindled now to some 50 men, by deaths and hardship or affrays, and they were become wary, and set scouts or a watch about them, whether moving or at rest. Thus they were soon aware of Turin when he strayed into their haunts. They trailed him, and they drew a ring around him, so that suddenly, as he came out into a glade beside a stream, he found himself within a circle of men with bent bows and drawn swords. Then Turin halted, but he showed no fear. "Who are you?" he said. "I thought that only orcs waylaid men, but I see that I am mistaken." Is there still weirdness going on? I trust you could take care of it, Walter. Let's just calm down with all the strange comments, guys. It's just weird. Let's continue here. "You may rue the mistake," said Forweg, "for these are our haunts, and my men do not allow other men to walk in them. We take their lives as forfeit unless they can ransom them." Then Turin laughed grimly. "You will get no ransom from me, an outcast and an outlaw. You may search me when I am dead, but it may cost you dearly to prove my words true. Many of you are likely to die first." Nonetheless, his death seemed near, for many arrows were notched to the string, waiting for the word of the captain. And though Turin wore elven mail under his grey tunic and cloak, some would find a deadly mark. None of his enemies stood within reach of leap with the drawn sword. But suddenly Turin stopped, for he had espied some stones at the stream's edge before his feet. At that moment an outlaw, angered by his proud words, let fly a shaft aimed at his face, but it passed over him, and he sprang up again like a bowstring released, and cast a stone at the bowman with great force and true aim, and he fell to the ground with a broken skull. "I might be of more service to you alive in the place of that luckless man," said Turin. And turning to Forweg, he said, "If you are the captain here, you should not allow your men to shoot without command." "I do not," said Forweg, "but he has been rebuked swiftly enough. I will take you in his stead if you will heed my words better." "I will," said Turin, "as long as you are captain, and in all that belongs to a captain. But the choice of a new man to a fellowship is not his alone, I judge. All voices should be heard. Are there any here who do not welcome me?" Then 2 of the outlaws cried out against him, and one was a friend of the fallen man. Ulrad was his name. "A strange way to gain entry to a fellowship," he said. "The slaying of one of our best men." "Not unchallenged," said Turin. "But come then, I will endure you both together with weapons or with strength alone. Then you shall see if I am fit to replace one of your best men. But if there are bows in this test, I must have one too." Then he strode towards them, but Ulrad gave back and would not fight. The other threw down his bow and walked up to meet Turin. This man was Androg of Dorloman. He stood before Turin and looked up at him. And looked him up and down. "Nay," he said at length, shaking his head, "I am not a chicken heart, as men know, but I am not your match. There is none here, I think. You may join us for my part, but there is a strange light in your eyes. You are a dangerous man. What is your name?" "Nathian the Wronged, I call myself," said Turin. And Nathian he was afterwards called by the outlaws, but though he claimed to have suffered injustice, and to any who claimed the like he ever lent too ready an ear, no more would he reveal concerning his life or his home. Yet they saw that he had fallen from high estate, and that though he had nothing but his arms, I have to turn the page. Oh, those were made by elven smiths. He soon won their praise, for he was strong and valiant, and had more skill in the woods than they, and they trusted him, for he was not greedy, and took little thought for himself, but they feared him, because his sudden angers, which they seldom understood. To Doriath Turin could not, or in pride would not return, to Nargothrond, since the fall of Felagund none were admitted. To the lesser folk of Haleth and Brethil he did not deign to go, and to Dor Loman he did not dare, for it was closely beset, and one man alone could not hope, at that time as he thought, to come through the passes of the mountains of shadow. Therefore Turin abode with the outlaws, since company of any men made the hardship of the wild more easy to endure, and because he wished to live, and could not be ever at strife with them. He did little to restrain their evil deeds. Thus he soon became hardened to a mean and often cruel life, and yet at times pity and disgust would waken him. And then he was perilous in his anger. In this evil and dangerous way Turin lived to that year's end, through the need and hunger of winter, until stirring came, and then a fair spring. Okay. You shall not pass! Which is not a line from the book, but it was expertly said by Ian McKellen in the film version. All right, let me catch up on chat here. I'm sure there was a bunch of nonsense. Boy, I'm sorry, Walter, that you have to deal with this. Yeah. Yeah, Walter, you did an excellent job here. I mean, is Tom Bird or William? Maybe I should have done the Gandalf voice to confuse them. Let no orc stay in the light for long. Ground will be cast on any whom choose to make stupid remarks. Thank you, Walter. You have some mead? What kind do you have? I want to know about the mead you have. Did you get that? There's a company that sells it. Yeah. Occasionally we have weirdos, and this was the biggest batch of them that we've had. But my favorite part of this book of the Children of Húrin, the whole ending, really, like everything when he sets out from Brethil, and all the terrible things that happened, and Glaurung, and the leap of the stag, and everything. The whole ending, it's just so terrible. Have I seen the short music video of Tolkien describing the book? I'm not exactly sure what you mean, Stumpy. I think you might be referring to are you referring to Epic Rap Battles of History, perhaps? Oh, homemade. Oh, interesting. Really cool. Oh, you missed my answer to the Moria question. Oh, that one? Walk, walk. Oh, that's made by a fellow named Tom Cardy. He's from Australia. I know of him. He's a very, very funny man. He did some of my favorite little parody songs. I think he's very talented. I know what you're talking about. That's Tom Cardy. Honey mead from Dutch heathens. You're saving it for a special occasion. Nice. Which side of the state? I'm on the other side of the state. I'm in the Poconos. Pittsburgh. Let me ask you a question, Tommy. Have you ever been to the fake Burger King that they have over there? When I read about that, I read that there was a fake Burger King, and I'm like, I don't even like real Burger King, so I can't imagine how bad the fake Burger King was, and the whole story behind it. The first thing I did is I contacted a friend of mine who lives in Pittsburgh. Her name is Marielle. She's a very, very talented musician and a good friend. And I said, "Did you know?" I linked her to the article, and I said, "Do you know about this?" And she says, "Oh my God, I've been there. I didn't eat, but I went to the bathroom there." And she told me how her husband ordered a hamburger there, and it was weird. It was weird. Oh, you were from Kansas and you live in Malaysia. That's a beautiful country. That's a beautiful country. Um, Anyway, yeah, it looks like it's calmed down with all the weirdness and everything. And I don't know. It was just probably just one guy or maybe like a small group of people, you know. Walter, you did an excellent job. Thank you very much for just being a real great moderator, and I'm sure everybody else thanks you for keeping the chat clean. We don't often have issues in chat on our lives. Very, very, very rarely. So, you know. Have I ever played the Return of the King game or any of the Battle for Middle? Okay, so I haven't played the Battle for Middle Earth, but I have played the Return of the King. Both on I played the PlayStation version and I played like the one that was on my Game Boy, and I liked them. They were really cool. Um, I did want to play them on the channel eventually when I get my computer up and running. We do have gaming streams with Tolkien related. You were duped. They were, oh, I see. Everybody that I know from Pittsburgh has a story about going there. Oh man. We have played a few video games on the channel already. We did the Lord of the Rings for Super NES, which was really bad but fun to sort of go through. We did The Hobbit for GameCube. We did the most recently the Fellowship of the Ring for the Two Towers. I didn't even see that one time, Lord. But no, I basically what happened is the Third Age is the one that I most want to play. I have not played it. The reason that there's so many Tolkien games that I have not played is because when I was a kid, I was about, I want to say about 15 years old. I walked into a store and I saw the Lord of the Rings in for the Super Nintendo. I've never read the Quran. No, I'm not familiar with it at all. I have a few Muslim friends, and if I had any questions about that, I would ask them. But I have no idea about the Quran, so I would be the wrong person to ask. There's more than one city in Philadelphia. No, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are on opposite sides of the state. Philadelphia is to the southeast portion of Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh is way over to the west. It's pretty close to where Ohio is. My favorite. Well, there's not many dwarf realms. There's really just Moria and Erebor. I got to say, Moria in its prime is probably wonderful, wonderful, but we don't get to hear much about it, so I'd have to say Erebor. Um, but anyway, I walked in and I saw this. I was looking for Super Nintendo games, and I saw J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings Volume One. I was like, wow, they made a game based on The Lord of the Rings, and I looked at the back of it, and it seemed like a cool game, and I brought it home, and it was just terrible. It's just such a bad game, and I just sort of like, oh man, that's the last time I buy something game just because I like the license. You're reading The Lord of the Rings for the first time. That's so cool, Amelia. I hope you're enjoying it. Well, it seems like you are enjoying it. And if you ever have any questions about anything regarding it, definitely come to me. My question for you: have you read The Hobbit, or are you just jumping right into The Lord of the Rings? Um, oh, you watched the movies as a kid. Okay, okay, but you never understood the movie. Okay, understandable. They're a little they're a little heady for kids, so I can understand that. Keep it secret, keep it safe. Exactly. But anyway, I bought the Lord of the Rings, and and I played the Two Towers and everything, and the Return of the King on PlayStation. But those were based on the films and everything. But I basically was really cautious about buying any Tolkien related games. Um, oh, you're talking about the Iron Hills, Time Lord guy. That's what you're talking about. Unfortunately, we don't really know, unless you're talking about Erebor, but I think you're talking, yeah, the Iron Hills. We don't really know much about the Iron Hills. We don't know what it's like or anything. We just know that Dane came out of there to join them at Erebor. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna end stream. You guys have really lifted my spirits. I feel a lot better than I did earlier. I Time stands still at the Iron Hill. Well, that's in Balerion, but yes, that's a song by Blind Guardian. Frodo's time and okay, I'll do that and then we're gonna end because I do owe Walter a reading, and especially that he was doing such a great job in moderating the chat. So let me get that open for you. A little bit of Frodo in Rivendell. That's a lot to. Oh, you know what? Why don't we read the part where we talk about the mortal wound, since that came up in chat earlier, and then we'll end stream after this. Here we go. Do you really mean that Strider is one of the people of the old king? Said Frodo in wonder. I thought they had all vanished long ago. I thought he was only a ranger. Only a ranger? Cried Gandalf. My dear Frodo, that is just what the rangers are. The last remnant in the north of the great people, the men of the west. They have helped me before, and I shall need their help in days to come, for we have reached Rivendell, but the ring is not yet at rest. I suppose not, said Frodo, but so far my only thought has been to get here, and I hope I shan't have to go any further. It is very pleasant just to rest. I have had a month of exile and adventure, and I find it has been as much as I want. He fell silent and shut his eyes. After a while he spoke again. I have been reckoning, he said, and I can't bring the total up to October the 24th. It ought to be the 21st. We must have reached the ford by the 20th. You have talked and reckoned more than it is good for you, said Gandalf. How do the side and shoulder feel now? I don't know, Frodo answered. They don't feel at all, which is an improvement, but... He made an effort. I can move my arm again a little. Yes, it is coming back to life. It is not cold, he added, touching his left hand with his right. Good, said Gandalf. It is mending fast. You will soon be sound again. Elrond has cured you. He has tended you for days, ever since you were brought in. Days, said Frodo. Well, 4 nights and 3 days, to be exact. The elves brought you from the ford on the night of the 20th, and that is where you lost count. You have been terribly anxious, and Sam has hardly left your side day or night, except to run messages. Elrond is a master of healing, but the weapons of our enemy are deadly. To tell you the truth, I had very little hope, for I suspected that there is some fragment of the blade still in the closed wound, but it could not be found until last night. Then Elrond removed a splinter. It was deeply buried, and it was working inwards. Frodo shuddered, remembering the cruel knife with notched blade that had vanished in Strider's hands. Don't be alarmed, said Gandalf. It is gone now. It has been melted. And it seems that hobbits fade very reluctantly. I have known strong warriors of the big people who would quickly have been overcome by that splinter, which you bore for 17 days. So there you have it. So that actually illustrates what I was talking about earlier, that there was a piece, a splinter, as Gandalf talked about it, and confirms what we said earlier about the fact that Elrond basically did surgery on him. Minor surgery, but yeah. Let me see if I missed anything here. You tried to slog your way through the nature of Middle-earth and got stuck in elf history. How many generations was Ingwe, Elwë, and Finwë removed, and what about the other? We don't actually know the answer to that. The nature of Middle-earth is really, some pretty deep study stuff. But we don't actually know how many generations, if you go from Imin and Tata to those guys there, and we don't even know which generation Círdan is from, though I think that Círdan is from the same generation. I tend to think of them as sort of like maybe 3rd or 4th generation elves, but that's just my opinion. We don't really know that. So there you have it. There's a place in the countryside near people think is based on the Iron Hills. Interesting. But there you go. That was for Walter, for not only for his super chat, but also for the fact that he did an excellent job as moderator today. Usually the moderators don't have to do very much at all. Today we had a little bit of some weirdness here, but there you have it. I was just talking to actually to my mother yesterday, and I was saying to her about Tolkien, because we had a discussion about the Lord of the Rings, and she hasn't read these books in a very long time. And I say, and she's the type of person that watches the movies like over and over and over again, and sometimes will ask me a question. She'll call me up and say, "Hey, did they get Faramir right or whatever?" And I'd be like, "Well, not really, no." And I said, he wasn't very descriptive about people, but he was very, very descriptive about surroundings, and you would basically know exactly what it looked like. Not maybe exactly what Faramir looked like, other than he had black hair. But you knew exactly what every tree branch looked like, Today you went to war, but you're happy. Well, that was your respite. And by the way, the word respite has a linguistic root that is related to the word respect. So there you have it. A little bit of respect and rest together, a respite, a little bit of time in Rivendell after being chased by the Nazgul. I wonder if there was 9 of those accounts. That would have been funny, right? But anyway, guys, we're going to end stream. I am going to be streaming tomorrow. Tomorrow night at about 7:30 Eastern, and I'll also make a post and reminding you guys, and I'll of course talk about it on the Discord and everything. So thank you very much, Gavan and everybody. You definitely helped lift my spirits today. We're gonna end. I'll see you guys next time tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow night.